Hello everyone. Bienvenidos. Gracias para venir aquí. Thanks for coming here today. Thanks for coming to this final big event. And I'm really excited to be able to introduce Nicole Brown. Nicole Brown is Associate Professor at the UCL Institute of Education in the Department of Culture, Communication, and Media. A leading voice in embodied research, she draws on creative, arts-based methods to challenge conventional approaches to researching ableism, disability, chronic illness, and neurodivergence in higher education. Her research foregrounds lived experience and advocates for new ways of listening, speaking, and representing experience that drive cultural, institutional, and structural change. Nicole's publications include Photo Voice Reimagined, Making the Most of Your Research Journal, and Embodied Inquiry Research Methods. Her next book will be the creative anthology, Exceptionally Able. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. For having invited me, and I'm really excited to have been here. I'm going to start my presentation by saying that I have got two color slides, blue ones and green ones. Those of you who were in the workshop yesterday, you will recognize that. The green ones are the things where you will do things. The blue ones are things where I'm doing things. It did say it in the abstract that there's going to be like an element of exercise, so you will be doing some of the bits. But don't worry, nothing too onerous. Also, to start off with, as you can see at the top there is the slido.com. If you've got any question at any point during the presentation, I personally hate nothing more than having to wait to the end of the presentation when I've forgotten the question I wanted to ask. So if at any point during the presentation you've got a question, put it into the Slido. On each slide, at the bottom of the right side, is the code. So all you need to do is go to slido.com, check the code, which is on every slide, and just type in the questions. This is why I've got this funny setup. The laptop here connects me with your questions straight away, so I'll try to answer them as we go along. Also, the QR code is all of my slides. So if you want to have the full presentation to flick forward and backwards, you can do that too. So I'm giving everybody just a minute to sort themselves out with the Slido and the code. You will notice that I'm moving around quite a bit. I try to slow down because of the cameras, but I may not be very good at that, so somebody wave at me to sort of make me stop. So, what I've got planned for you today is very much based on quite a large body of work. So for the sake of completeness, I've got all of the books here, but a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is very much about embodiment and the academy. I'm then also going to be introducing to you some principles of embodied inquiry, so there's a little bit of theory, but largely I'm going to be showing you some examples from my own research, from the fibromyalgia research, and I will explain that a little bit later. And as I said, I really want you to be able to ask questions. I know this is supposed to be a lecture, but I want this to be as meaningful to all of you as possible. So let me begin. Burn me down. I need to play this. There we go. have got the slides, so you can actually follow up on that, and feel free to connect with me over the full song. This is just to kind of give you an example of what embodiment and the body in research actually can look like. And I'll explain that a little bit later. Here is another example. I need duvet days. Shattered, broken, numb, empty, physically and emotionally. It is very invisible. I'm sick all the time. I'm fed up with it, and I'm trying to live my life without it, but it's getting worse. My brain is working, but my body can't do it. It started in one bit of my body, and now other bits of my body follow. I can be as well as possible with a full life, but I think of myself as a perpetual patient, as disabled. It isn't how I thought my life was going to be. This is what I'm trying to get across, that we're having to bring the body back. And I'll explain that. What we have in the academy, unfortunately, there is something there about the ideal academic body or the normal academic body, which is non-existent, essentially. There's the idea that we're all just disembodied minds, that we are a lot of the times neutral, able-bodied, that we're white, that we're male. All of those are implications of what the body looks like. There's also something that physical needs are basically disregarded and ignored most of the time. Knowledge practices, unfortunately, writing styles, the way we're presenting at conferences, all of those things, again, favor the brain, forget the body. If we're looking at the temporal disembodiment, what we mean by that is academic time. We have to be productive at all times. There is no time for rest. There's no time for sleep. There is no acknowledgement that maybe fatigue or hormonal imbalances may cause certain problems that we are having to overcome. Burnout is normalized. It's something that we are expected to experience almost. The spatial disembodiment, that's obviously, again, how offices and classrooms are structured. I mean, you can see it here. We are so far apart from one another. That's one of those things that are happening on a regular basis. So all of those things are the state of the affair in the academy most of the time. So what then is a meaningful corporeal praxis? Because this is what I'm advocating for. So what I'm trying to say is that knowledge is produced from somewhere. Someone is producing it, and that someone has a body. So we have to take that into account, and we have to bring that into our experience. So it's something that we're looking at from representation to practice. So it's not just about writing about bodies, but actually listening to them, changing how we do research, not just by talking to people, but actually trying to get close to the embodiment, their bodily experiences, but also ours as researchers. And then obviously within all of that, we still have to attend to rigor. We can't just do what we want. We have to be, in some way, systematic about our approach. So that's what I'm going to try again and explain to you. Oh, look at that. It's a green one. So that means you are doing what it says on there. What I would like you to do is you don't have to get up if you don't want to. You can stay seated. But I'm going to set my timer for 1 minute, and I want you to track your bodies for 1 minute. That's all I'm asking you to do. Just take note. Take note of your body, all of your body parts, your joints. Don't judge, though. If you feel yourself judging, move away from that. Just for 1 minute. So I'm starting the timer now for 1 minute. That was the timer. So this was your 1 minute. It does say here, write down your observations. As we are such a lovely, sweet group, I suggest you talk to your neighbours about your observations for 1.5 minutes. So I'm giving you 1.5 minutes time to talk to your neighbours about your experiences. Off you go. There we go. That was the timer again. I'm not going to ask you at this stage to share your experiences with me, but to be honest, I would be interested in how many of you actually judge their bodies, and I would suggest that the majority of us have done that. We tend to do that very, very quickly, that we kind of move and then go, well, actually, that shoulder really hurts, or, ooh, I'm really unfit. That's something that we tend to do quite often, but we have to try and move away from that. It's almost like regaining some state of mindfulness rather than actually judgmental experience of our body. Let me bring to you some sort of principles and foundational philosophies of embodied inquiry, which is what I'm trying to kind of integrate in almost all of my research. So basically, this need of focusing on the body. And I'm relying here on Chris Schilling as a sociologist, and I'm also relying on Drew Leader, who's actually more of a philosopher. They both say that actually the body is absent in most of the times if we're looking at whatever we're looking at. So Chris Schilling says, for example, in sociological theory, a lot of the big theorists are implying that the body is important, but they're not explicitly talking about it. So when we're talking about the division of labor, it's expected that that body whose labor is taken on is an able-bodied person. It's not a disabled body. So straight away there is an implication. Durkheim, for example, has done massive amount of work around suicide, which very much the lift against the dead body, and yet the body is not mentioned. So there's that element that's problematic. Drew Leader takes us in a different direction. He says, actually, most of the time, we are not consciously aware of our bodies. We breathe, but we only take notice of our breathing when it doesn't work. It's when we are coughing, that's when we notice that we are breathing. The same is true the joints. We bend and stretch our joints all the time, but we don't take notice unless the joint aches. So what Drew Leader is saying, there is this absent body in our own consciousness, and what he talks about is that the body appears in its dysfunction. So when it's dysfunctional, that's when we become aware of it. And that's one of the aspects as to why we are actually trying to, really foreground the body consciously. So it's an opportunity to really overcome that body-mind split. And at the same time, it's the recognition that actually there is knowledge constructed and produced somewhere else, not just in our brains and not just in our emotions, actually in the physicality of it. Just think about anyone asking you, how do you switch gears in your car? You will go like this. It's a very embodied knowing. You know how to switch the gears in your car through the embodiment, through the repetition. Some people call it muscle memory. That's what we are talking about here. Obviously, I'm talking from the vantage point or from the viewpoint of someone who's white, female, very much grown up in the Western society. So I'm not going to suggest that I know everything from all of the different cultures and different communities, by far from it. But at the same time, I do recognize that there is something in other spiritual experiences or other knowledges that I'm going to try and learn to incorporate that into our way of thinking. So, the foundations of embodied inquiry, and this brings me to some of the presentations I've seen today. It's very much about phenomenology, so it is about the lived experience, it is about the experience that we have. It's also hermeneutics, which is obviously the study of interpretation. Originally, the study of interpretation of Christian text. It was very much about Christianity and the Bible, but actually nowadays it's about interpretation of text. And a lot of the times we're talking about the double hermeneutics, where we are making sense of the participant, making sense of their experiences. And then there are 3 cornerstones of human understanding, and that is, first of all, human understanding is embodied. Think about how babies and toddlers grow up, how they experience the world. They put everything into their mouth, they're being held, they're being cuddled, so it's very much an embodied experience. Yes, of course, we are talking to them as well, but their experience, their learning is embodied. The next aspect is that language is insufficient and inexact. For example, think of a headache. How would you describe a headache? Just a few words coming to mind? What about if I'm telling you the headache is not any odd headache, but a headache that you get just before you have fever? Does the headache feel the same? Are the words the same? What about the headache of a migraine, for example? Does it feel the same? Are the words different or the same again? What about the headache that you have when you have a hangover? All of those are headaches, but actually we are struggling to explain how they feel different. And the final thing is, because human understanding is embodied, because language is insufficient, we are relying on metaphors a lot of the time. And that's one of the basic principles of embodied inquiry. We are therefore drawing on the creative and arts-based methods a lot. So this is a brief reminder what art-based methods are about. And they're very much about the powers of evocation, expression, and illumination. And that's important. So I know that a lot of the times today and yesterday we talked about participatory approaches and how creative methods help that. But actually the philosophy behind creative and participatory research is slightly different. So it's very much about expression, evocation, and illumination. I'm just kind of trying to remind myself that I've got some questions as well. So there is one particular question already there, or rather a comment, so please do use the Slido. Just reflecting on how tired I am, I agree with you. It's been a long 3 days, hasn't it? So, there is a continuum of embodied inquiry. There is obviously something that enables us to really lean into it and do everything focused solely on the body. But we don't have to do that. We've got opportunities to move along this kind of continuum during a research project. And I'm going to show you some examples of that. Essentially, there are 4 big areas of research focus. The first one is the lived experience. The second one is the researcher's body in the field. The third one is the body as a communicator. And the final one is the body in interaction. So the body as a communicator, very briefly, that would be if we are looking at how people communicate through an embodied way. So for example, in a surgical theatre, one person would do this, the other person knows exactly what instrument goes into this hand. They're not standing there thinking, ooh, what do I have to do here? They know exactly in an embodied way and they will respond in an embodied way. So the bodies are communicating. The body in interaction, that's where we are essentially talking to each other. The body as a communicator is, sorry, I do apologize, the example of the surgical theory is the body and interaction. The body as a communicator is where we are looking at people's experiences, for example, how they tattoo their bodies, how they've got piercings on their bodies, how they wear their hair, what kind of fashion they decide. So what do the bodily expressions communicate about people's identity, for example? The reason I've covered those two is because I haven't got many examples of that, but I do have something about the researcher's body in the field. And here we go. This is about trying to track your experiences. In this case, what I'd like you to do is I'm going to play an example from a real project, and I'm trying to ask you to notice your emotions this time. And this example is from my fibromyalgia research. This was about the academic identity under the influence of fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia being something like widespread pain, cognitive dysfunctions like brain fog, sleep disturbances, psychological dysfunctions like depression, for example. And here is a person talking to me about her experience. Does this play now? No, it didn't. It did earlier. There we go.
I can remember I would come home from school, particularly from GCSE points, and I would basically go to bed when I came in. You know, I can't remember anyone ever being worried about the fact that I came home and went to bed. Yeah. You know, which, looking back, I don't know how normal that is. I don't think my peers did that when they went home. And so the first mention of fibromyalgia, which I've got this on a sticky note in my notes. The first mention of fibromyalgia was on the 19th of May 2003. You know, I mean, years went by of living on benefit. It wasn't how I thought my life was going to be.
Okay, so I'm going to stop that there. I'm going to stop that there. I'm giving you, again, 1 minute in this case to talk to your neighbours about what you've just observed in your own emotions. Starting the timer now. There we go. So this was an example, and I will give you another example in a little while about the researcher's lived experience and why it's important to connect with those emotions that you are experiencing. What I'd like to just very quickly highlight is that for the lived experience, that's something that a lot of people are asking me. How can you sort of identify, how can you work with other people, you know, in terms of like trying to get close to their bodily experiences? These are just some examples of creative data collection methods or data generation methods that will help us do that. And here are some examples from my own research, the fibromyalgia research. So this was an identity box where I asked people different questions and they had to put objects into the boxes. People also created collages, and some people sent me a load of photographs. One person sent me 187 photographs. So I'm usually inundated with data. That's the same person, as you can see. She's annotating the pictures to kind of make it clear what her embodied experience and her bodily experience is like. But I don't just work with objects. I also work with other things, in this case, Lego models. The reason I'm showing you that is because you do need to understand when I'm talking about the researcher's body in the field, that is really focusing on me and my own embodiment, which often in the moment is not creative. But when I'm looking at the lived experience of other people, that's where I tend to employ the creative methods. I have seen a couple of questions. I'll come to those. What I do want you to do is notice and track your emotions on this one as I'm reading out the text. This is a green one, and I do want you to discuss that with your neighbours and then come back to me. So Nicole is obviously me. Claire is one of the participants whose first name started with a C, but Claire is not her actual name. Can I ask you about, I'm going to read out from here. Can I ask you about the marijuana prescription you mentioned? Yes. It was because I was in so much pain that I could not see life without pain, and I could not face going into more pain as a daily thing. There are 2 family members who will no longer associate with me due to my marijuana use. My eldest daughter and her husband have gone so far as to try and stage an intervention. Nicole, it must be upsetting to think that this has affected relationships. But that aside, how do you feel about taking drugs? Claire, I feel like I'm taking my prescription just like any other person. Nicole, would you ever have thought that you would do drugs like that? Claire, no. As a paramedic, I hardly even drank. And now I eat pot brownies. Wow, that's a totally different me. But it works, so I will continue. I'm opening the space up for a genuine discussion, so I'm going to give you 2 minutes to discuss with your neighbours first, and either put your comments, your questions into the Slido, or be prepared to kind of talk to me directly. Starting the timer now. Ew, it disappeared. If they raise their hands or so, yes, please. Brilliant, thank you. How can you identify by the pages? We've got until past, right? Okay, so any comments or questions? There's one question from earlier which I'm going to address after this, and you'll see in a minute why. Any comments or questions regarding this slide? Oh, come on. There at the back, yes, please. Just give us a second. You get the microphone. I probably won't hear you without the microphone, to be honest.
Hi, I was just wondering, for Claire, and even all of your participants, are they from Europe? Or just because I know in Canada marijuana is legal,
Yes.
and I wonder if that's like where they're situated and what the situation is.
Thank you for that question. So I'm obviously from the UK. I was carrying out this particular part, was actually the pilot to my real study. And as part of the pilot, I did have people from international backgrounds. And at the time, this person was from Canada. And at the time, marijuana was not prescribed in the UK, which is why I was particularly interested in this. Because this was something that wasn't a UK thing yet. So that's why I was following up on that. Yes, thank you. Would you like one more? Yeah, shoot. Oop.
It's more of like a comment of stuff we talked about.
Yes, please.
Okay. So we had a couple of things. One is that it's a piece of text, and I think for a lot of people, reading a piece of text feels different to actually having a full-on conversation with the person, and their body language and how they express themselves. And also, I think you might resonate with it more if you connect with something in there. So I've had chronic pain for 2 years. Fortunately, I'm okay now. But, I've been at that point where you try everything and, you try absolutely anything to be better and you just can't. Sorry.
No.
So I emotionally connect with it. But I think if you've never been there, I think it's difficult.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. And I totally appreciate that. And you're completely right. There is a difference between listening to the original voice and actually me reading it out. Absolutely. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? I'm kind of hoping for someone to challenge me. Anyone willing to challenge me? You put one there. Difficult because you sit here and... difficult because you sit here to learn. Yes, absolutely. Made me feel sad. How is... Okay, that's something different. How is... Okay. I'm still looking for some more challenge. I'm coming back to all of those points, but I'm still looking for someone else to really pipe up. Anyone willing to give it a go? Go, please.
I don't need a microphone. So my question is she, I'm sad
for her, yes.
But my question is, as a parent of an adult child, all right?
Yes.
I'm wondering, if this is causing tension in the relationship, that can't be the root cause of it. What is underneath that?
There is that, yes, there is that. I agree with you. But actually, if I may say, that was not quite what I was after. I reckon that you guys are just too polite. Let's have a look at that together, shall we? Do you want to give it a go? Yes, absolutely. My language. I'm totally leading. She talks about, so I'm starting out with, can I ask you about the marijuana prescription, which is obviously the word that she used earlier in the interview. So I'm saying, well, let's talk about this marijuana prescription. Then she goes on about explaining how difficult the situation is, how you're trying everything that you can try, nothing works. You end up with going, actually, I'm going to get this marijuana, I'm just going to try that now. And then I'm going, whoa, hang on a minute. That must be upsetting to think that this has affected relationships. I mean, that is totally invalidating her experience. What happened in real life is this. I sat there and I was at that point myself where I felt the pain that she's feeling. And she's now telling me, actually, I tried the marijuana and then my family broke off that relationship. I agree with you, it can't have been the only thing, but it seemed to have been the final straw. I agree with you. But now she's broken this relationship off, her family doesn't want to connect with her anymore. At that point, my body started clenching up, my guts, my interiors was clenching up, my shoulders were painful, I was physically in pain in that specific moment. So, when I'm saying here, it must be upsetting to think that this has affected relationships. What I'm really saying is, this is upsetting me because it has affected your relationships. That's what I'm saying. And then I'm continuing, but that aside, let's just forget about that. That aside, how do you feel about taking drugs? And I'm the one that introduces drugs. So what I'm trying to do is, I can feel I'm derailing here. I've got a very, very physical response to this interview, and I'm trying to bring this back on track somehow. So I'm going to try and introduce, okay, let's put this relationship thing aside, and let's try and focus on what we're talking about here, which is the drugs. We continue the conversation. I'm taking my prescription just like any other person. She brings it back to the prescription. I then take it a step further by saying, would you have thought that you do drugs? So I'm no longer just asking about taking drugs, I'm actually doing drugs. This is me derailing completely. In the moment of the interview, I knew something was going wrong. Like I said, I had a very, very, very embodied experience to the situation. So I knew something went wrong. But how badly wrong it had gone, I had only seen when I saw the transcript. So this is one of the reasons why I'm saying to you, actually the body is something that we do have to listen to. And in real life we do. When you go down a weird corridor somewhere, you get the creeps. When you go into a city that you don't know and you realize, well, this is a dodgy area, you get funny about it. You listen to your body in those situations, so why don't we do that in research? Actually, it should tell us something. When we get the goosebumps, when we get excited about something, when you suddenly feel like, you know, this is doing something to me physically. So this is an example of this here. So that's something that I just wanted to kind of point out as an experience as to why bringing the body back is so important. But then what happens with the kind of work that I'm doing with the embodied inquiry and the embodied scholarship is that actually we're moving beyond just the data generation and listening to our own bodies. We're trying to bring that body back in every aspect. So this is me doing analysis. So yes, I'm doing coding, by the way. I'm still doing traditional coding. If you read my articles, you will see in vivo reflexive thematic analysis. That's my go-to thing. But I do also do creative and embodied analysis. So this is me trying to express in a clay figure about that size in real life, what it feels like to have fibromyalgia if it was visible. So all the pain being made visible. Here, the emotions being made visible. Then we've got another example. This is, as I've said to you, this here was from the data generation phase. It's a Lego model of the kind of two different experiences that we have, of the public self and the private self. The person that you're pretending to be and the person that you actually are because of your illness. But although this is data generation, so this particular model was something that a participant built, at the same time, it's already an analytical kind of piece. It's no longer just a description, it's an analysis already. And I took that, together with all the other narratives that have happened, and put it further into this kind of painting. I was experimenting with different types of materials. That painting isn't something that I was ever going to share as an output. It was always just a stepping stone for me to make sense of the data. This is me experimenting with what I'm getting from my participants, all of those different stories, and trying to kind of connect the dots and create something that's meaningful. There are also other opportunities. There is, within embodied analysis, you have, for example, you can make use of poetic inquiry. I have listened to a presentation today about poetic inquiry, for example. And that's something that we tend to use. There are different forms, so for the sake of completeness, I've got all of the examples there. But the example from earlier today that I started the presentation with is a found poem from my own fibromyalgia research. What you got was different lines from different interviews cobbled together into something that would make it a meaningful, coherent piece of work that explains what it feels like to have fibromyalgia. There's also this. Now in this case, that's the Burn Me Down that I shared with you at the beginning. That was from a set of data which looked like this, a song list. So one of the participants sent me a song list, and explained to me that this is a playlist that she used at the time when it was particularly bad with the fibromyalgia flare-up. And I did not know for a long time, I did not know what to do with it. Eventually, I felt actually I can do something in that I'm collaborating with someone else to create a song. And that is that song that burned me down. There is a whole story behind what happens there, but essentially the artist is somebody who's very close to me and knows what it is like to have fibromyalgia. So it's a lot of it is personal as well as research. And then you've also got the opportunity to look at installations, and this is an example from the fibromyalgia experience again. This is the chair that was exhibited in the gallery. As you can see, if you look in, that is what it looked like. So it's basically the experience of fibromyalgia amongst people. So I feel like I've talked quite a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this one here, where we take a moment to give you all an opportunity to think about with one another what kind of questions you may want to ask, and add them to the list, and then I'll run through the questions as they come in. I have got some more slides, obviously with more theory. If you're interested in those, I'm quite happy to run through, but I want to make sure that we get to answer all of the questions first. So I'm going to give you 1 minute, to think up any kind of questions or any comments that you may have from the presentation so far. Starting the counter now. Link to song, yeah. Yes. Okay. So one of the first questions that came in earlier is, how can you identify body bias? To identify body bias, quite frankly, is very, very difficult. It tends to be in microaggressions. It tends to be so minor, sort of discriminative tones and voices that it's really difficult to kind of identify that. Ultimately, what I'm assuming in my own work is that there's always the favor towards the white, able-bodied body. And therefore, as far as I'm concerned, everything else will be marginalized and discriminated against. How is analytic traceability ensured across diverse embodied methods? So this is obviously something that's interesting in terms of the analysis. I can share with you in a minute how we can ensure good quality in embodied research, which will answer some of that question. I'll come back to that. It's difficult because you sit here to learn and as a researcher, but at the same time you're human with feelings and emotions, but we switch them off a bit. Exactly. That is exactly why we need to make sure that we're actually becoming in tune with our bodies again. I think the biggest challenge with acting upon the body's signal in research or in any conversation is bridging the two speeds. I assume you're talking about the speed of real life and the speed of the conversation. I'm not quite sure about that, but I agree with you. Sometimes it feels like you have to stay in the moment because you're having that conversation. You want to focus on the other person, but at the same time you need to go in yourself and be mindful of what's going on in your own body. How I tend to overcome that is that I check in occasionally. I don't check in every moment of the day. Quite frankly, that would be exhausting in itself. So I'm checking in at particular points. But I have practiced that so much that when there is a tiny, hair standing up in the back of my neck, I'm tuning into that straight away. So I'm just checking in occasionally. Yes. Did I member check the poem? I did. And also the illustration, actually, the fibro chair, I also member checked that. So I created those things at home and developed them on my own initially, and then went back to all of the participants and asked them for opinions and their views, and improved on the pieces until they were ready to be shown. Do I have fibromyalgia? Yes, I do. Amongst other things, by the way. So yes. How do I use thematic analysis on non-textual data, such as the 100 images? So what I tend to do is, I tend to do two things. As I've spoken about in other opportunities before, analysis of text is exactly the same as analysis of the visuals. You're looking at the first layer, what you see, the descriptive part, and then you're doing the interpretation of it. So I'm doing that, exactly that same process. I'm immersing myself, and I'm then coding the photographs according to what am I seeing, what is on this photograph, and then what do I interpret. So that's something that I'd connect in that respect. But in addition to that traditional coding, that's obviously the currency in academia, I then do the creative forms, where I may be using any kind of material that I find in my house. How do I... Oh, and then also by the 100 plus photographs, just to add to that, I did not use all of them. I selected. Because a lot of them were duplicated in many ways. I mean, you've seen the 3 pictures with the socks. There's no real need to look at it, you know, in the 15 different versions. So I selected as well. In photo voice projects, usually with participants or anyone that I'm advising, I suggest people actually say to participants that they are limited to sending 6 photos or something, because they don't stick to the 6 anyway. But yeah, that way you can kind of contain the magnitude a little bit. How do I ensure that I'm not leading in conversations or in interviews? So this is something that I can't guarantee. I'm trying my best, but I can't guarantee it. How I'm actually approaching interviews, and I have mentioned this book to a few people today. There is a book by Brinkman and Quale. By the way, I don't recommend books very often, simply because we haven't got time to read whole books. But that one is one that I recommend wholeheartedly. Brinkman and Quale, interviews with a capital V, because they see interviews as an interview, an interaction between the participant and the researcher. And as such, I am therefore then a data traveler, according to their philosophy. So I'm traveling along the journey with the participants of making sense. And in that respect, my interview transcripts are full conversations. They are not structured or semi-structured, they are proper conversations. I usually know which topic I want to explore. I usually have one opening question, but then everything else follows on from that. So yes, I may be leading, but I will be saying things like, ooh, when you say this, this is what I'm hearing. Does that resonate? So even if I'm leading, I'm actually making a point of, this is what I hear, this is how I'm beginning to lead here, and then they can respond to that. Where would I suggest early career researchers to start bringing in embodiment in research? To be honest, with reflexivity, because that's essentially the researcher's body in the field. So if you've never done any embodiment before, that is the starting point, because you've got to do reflexivity anyway. You may as well just do it in that way, that you're not just thinking about your philosophical standpoint and your political views, you're actually, and your theoretical frameworks, that you're actually also thinking, okay, and who am I as a person? Who am I as a body? What am I representing with my body? What kind of things do I communicate to my participants through my body? What happens to my body in those kinds of situations when I'm interviewing people? So that's where I find that's kind of the easiest situation of starting. How can I handle stressful bodily experiences in interaction with the participant? Thank you. Great question. And that is something that I find, obviously in that situation, I didn't handle it. I didn't handle it at all. I was just trying to get my act together, and I couldn't. And in the end, that interview transcript, where it's very obvious, so when you read through my transcript, it's very obvious where I've actually got my act together again. So those questions that were leading, I did not use for my analysis. I basically just struck them off because I was too leading. But now I would see things differently, I would do it differently. If something like that happens, I'm going to say, you know what, I need a moment. Because we give the participants the opportunity to kind of say, actually, this is difficult for me, I need a moment. But why don't we take that moment for ourselves? So this is what I am doing now, is that I'm actually, handling those stressful situations for myself by saying, you know what, I need a breather here. Can we just take a minute? And then I get that moment of actually capturing myself and going back to being the body that I'm supposed to be. Can I recommend how, as a researcher, we can do little check-ins to our embodied experiences during research without, any top tips? So, quite frankly, the best way to learn how to do those little check-ins is by actually engaging actively in meditative and mindful kind of activities. So if you are doing mindfulness, if you're doing yoga, if you're doing Pilates, all of those things will help you get a better bodily experience in your everyday life, and that's how you can then begin to build it into your research. So I would suggest try out, if you're not doing any of those embodied practices, try them out, get involved with them, and then try and use them in everyday conversations with your friends and your family. Just see, what happens if I'm checking my breathing here? Practice it in those situations first before you bring it into the research. But essentially, it's just becoming more attuned with your body. And it's not something that happens overnight. It's something that does require practice. So that's the other thing that I would recommend, is to kind of stick with the practice. How can we include the body in analysis and interpretation and communicate these to reviewers and readers? Essentially what I do is I create my things. So, for example, the fibro chair. That was something there, the fibro chair. So that was something that people were talking to me about. They were talking about how they manage their condition. And they were talking about, for example, that they are told to find a new hobby, which is why we've got the knitting ball there. But if you look carefully, nothing's knitted. That's because the repetitive strain of the knitting actually causes more pain than it helps. So you've got these kinds of objects that during the interviews often, I'm tuning into those things. I'm kind of, this is an interesting one. This is something that fascinates me. I hadn't thought about that. Those kinds of moments, I'm basically just making a note of, and then afterwards, I'm cobbling them together, in this case, to this installation. So I'm not trying to say that, you kind of check in at every point all the time. It's just a case of actually doing the analysis in the moment and then bringing it back to your own space and experimenting with it. So there are several iterations of this chair which didn't work. I've got plenty, like I said to you also, the painting that I have, that doesn't work. It doesn't help anything. It's not evocative. It doesn't illuminate anything. So it's there as an analytical step, but not as a final piece. This final piece was submitted to a gallery from the perspective of an artist. It was not a research output. It was, here is an art piece that demonstrates what it means that art is something much more dangerous. That's how it was submitted. So it stands as an art piece. I mentioned that my bodily experiences are in the way of the interview. Could those experiences and the awareness of also be beneficial? Absolutely. So what I'm trying to say is, in this particular case, with this particular example, it was in the way of the interview because it derailed me, but that is because the shock was just too big. I hadn't expected that. But usually it's an opportunity to make a note of, this is something I want to explore further in my own creative practice as well. Do I inform participants before that I will use? Yes, they know that will be in a creative way. A lot of them are also signing up to co-constructing creative pieces with me, so they are informed of all of that. Also, when it comes to then actually creating the pieces, I'm checking back with them, and I share what I'm allowed to share. What's my responsibility to the participants when I notice my body bias? Thoughts on how your bias might impact their responses. That's really interesting, thank you. To be honest, a lot of the times I'm trying to remove myself from that. Obviously, I can't always, but I do try to remove myself from that because I'm working with, as you've heard earlier, with disabled, chronically ill, and neurodivergent academics. So I do see a lot of different kinds of disabilities coming through to my research projects. I see a lot of different kinds of bodies. So it's something that I'm trying to attune myself to. Am I able to always sort of recognize how my body interacts with the other person's body? Probably not. It's something that I'm trying to get more practice with, but it's a bit difficult because a lot of my interviews are online. Again, because I have to do them online because of accessibility purposes so that we don't have to travel, the participants don't have to travel. And that's something that's becoming a little bit problematic because on the space, you only see part of the person. And therefore, they don't see your body fully and you don't see theirs fully. I've got a few more questions. How is the song creation establishing musical interpretation? Thank you for that question. So in this particular case, we had obviously the data set. We also sat down together and talked about what it feels like to have fibromyalgia. And the musician in this case is my son. So he knows what I have gone through in the past. So he also was able to put in his own perspective of what it was like to be someone attached to, therefore indirectly affected by fibromyalgia. And we sat down together and talked about, what are the key points that we need to bring across. I didn't influence him in any way musically. It's his choice of genre. And he just felt that he really needs to bring that dissonance out. And that's why you've got this really harsh bass that filters through the electronic music. We have written the article. It's under review, so do watch that space. We haven't got huge amounts of time left, have we? How to triangulate text data with non-verbal body language. So I don't triangulate as such. I don't. I tend to work through the experiences of my own body in the creative way. I work through the embodied experiences of my participants through their photographs, through their object work, and I don't triangulate in that traditional sense of what I do is go back and member check. So I do that a lot, but not triangulation. I've done that. How is reflexivity prevented from becoming a methodological bias? Reflexivity can never be methodological bias. Reflexivity is already lifting the bias into subjectivity. It removes exactly that uncritical understanding. So if you're doing reflexivity well, then you are challenging yourself all the time. So it can't be a methodological bias in that respect. I think I'm going to stop there. Obviously, thank you very much for the many, many questions. I'm going to try and answer them, and I will see whether we can share them through your emails or whatever, that I can respond to those questions in writing. But thank you very much. It was great to have been here. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Nicole Brown. This was really, really insightful. Thank you for your questions. I was going to start at first in the willingness, the space that you created to help us all feel vulnerability and a willingness to share. And thank y'all for holding that space and being there as an arts-based researcher. And please stay for 1 minute. We have one present for you. So, and a justice-centered researcher, I wanted to also say just how much you've brought forward, that you've inspired me, and I'm really looking forward to engaging more and hearing more from y'all. And from then the conference as a whole, we wanted to give you this as a thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. That's very kind. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, lovely. Thank you very much.
And I think now, right, we're passing it over to some other folks who will officially end the conference. Thank you.